Hello and welcome to Civil War Digital Digest. I'm Andy, on location from my home office, to talk to you today about a new outcoming book called Warriors for Liberty. Before we get going, I want to say thank you to our patrons. They're our sponsors, the Coffee Grinders, who support us on Patreon. Their donations every month, for as little as a cup of coffee every month, helps go a long way towards our production, letting us hire crew, editors, things like that, letting us travel locations. If you're not already a patron, I highly encourage you to check out the links below and go sign up. If you are already, thank you so much. The book I want to talk about today, Warriors for Liberty by Jack Dempsey, is put out by the Michigan Civil War Association. Will and I are both associated with the group. Will's on the board with it. And it's a great institution that's trying to help focus more things on Michigan in the Civil War. And right now, their efforts are focused towards fundraising to put a Michigan monument on the Antietam Battlefield. The proceeds from this book are actually helping further that endeavor. Now, the book itself examines something that probably doesn't get looked at enough in the Civil War, and it's Michigan's African-American residents' role in the war. One of the big drives in recent years is to do this idea of war in society. How does war affect people at home? How does society affect the war? Not just how is the war fought in these very strict, old school, great men of history kind of ways where this general moved these troops on this battlefield. How does society evolve in war? How is war reflections of the societies themselves? And this book is at an interesting crossroads in this entire process, because not only does it talk about Black civilians at home and the process of abolition and Michigan's place in that society, but it also talks about Black Michiganders going to fight in the war. For me personally, growing up in this state, I've always been under the impression Michigan kind of had this special place. We were in the Northwest Territory, so slavery was never really part of Michigan's story. And that's not 100% true. There was slavery here in the French and British colonial periods. And then as the Americans came in, there's, of course, people who moved through the area who had slaves, who had come from slave states. And then, of course, there's always the issue of the Underground Railroad, where Michigan was one of the terminuses of it. As enslaved people in the southern states escaped and made their way north, for a lot of them, Detroit was, if not the final destination, at least near the end of the journey. For a lot of people, this was a great place to come. For those of you who don't know, Canada is just to our south. You can make your way up to Michigan. The Detroit River is only a couple hundred yards across. If you get south into Windsor, you're in freedom. And for a lot of African Americans who had just escaped slavery, that's why they came to Detroit. And so this book does a great job of mixing several different stories, the stories of several individuals, taking some big picture views, and there's some of the names that you absolutely know from the Civil War. Sojourner Truth, who lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Frederick Douglass, who had come through the state several times, and people associated with the abolition movement coming through, as well as some more everyday, down-to-earth people that you've never heard of before. One of the people that Dempsey looks at a lot with this book is named William Dollarson. That's not the name he was born with. He was born enslaved in Virginia, ended up in Mississippi, and finally escaped to freedom, coming up a steamboat to Cincinnati, and then making his way into the North. Now, he didn't serve as a soldier during the Civil War, but interestingly, he served as the cook to General Alpheus Williams' staff. Alpheus Williams, who is from Detroit, served in the Mexican War, was a member of the Detroit Light Guard, which is the local militia company in Detroit, was very influential in the state politics, and early on volunteered for service in the war, served as a brigadier general and then later a brevet major general, commanding divisions and corps. Specifically was associated with the 12th and later 20th Corps in the armies of the Potomac, Army of the Cumberland, and then finally the Army of Georgia through the end of the war. And William Dollarson was part of that journey with Alpheus Williams and provides some interesting insights into the general, his staff, and all that, but also showing the role of this free Black man on the staff with all other white people. The other role that's talked about in here is the story of the 102nd U.S. Colored Troops, which was originally raised as the 1st Michigan Colored Infantry. Michigan didn't have a huge Black population at the start of the war, but not only did we raise our own regiment of infantry, but about 100 men from the 54th Massachusetts were actually raised in Michigan. So about a company's worth of that regiment that was made famous by the movie Glory were raised here and served in the 54th Massachusetts. Later in the summer of 1863, Michigan decided to raise their own regiment. and then went on to service in the East Coast, actually serving in the same brigade with the 54th and 55th Massachusetts at the Battle of Honey Hill in South Carolina in 1864. By taking several disparate stories, all with the same theme, and putting them together, Dempsey kind of creates a mosaic of getting both very individual stories and very wide national ranging stories and several in between to make this story. And he also tells the story of not just, it's anti-slavery movement in America and all that, but specifically in Michigan. How did it look for a frontier state as it developed from a British territory to an American territory to an American state? And that journey through the late 18th century, the early 19th century, and into the Civil War. How did that journey to freedom, towards equality, towards integration work? Of course, it wasn't a perfect process, but it's interesting to see the ways that, a city like Detroit, in a lot of ways, was really a cutting-edge place for integration and all the things that are issues that we still deal with today. So if you haven't had time to check it out, Warriors for Liberty from the Michigan Civil War Association, by Jack Dempsey, just got published. If you get a chance, go check it out. We'll put the link for where to purchase it below. And for Civil War Digital Digest, I'm Andy, and we'll catch you next time.